Hi, it's Xanthe here. Just getting ready for work. It's already 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I just want to make a few notes. Talk about a topic that really pisses me off, and that is this whole sorry, just take some more notes. This whole idea of this late onset autism. Now, there seems to be two autisms. There is that is obvious to others and clinically picked up, and then there's the others who want identity, and they gather together in communities online and convince each other that they must be autistic based on some very common traits that are in a good chunk of the population. Examples: a highly sensitive person trait, which is in like 20 or 30% of the population, right? So therefore they convince each other that they must be autistic, take it on as identity, make it into something that has absolutely nothing to do with autism altogether, and then they say that the doctors are all gatekeeping, blah 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 blah. I have had so much abuse over this over the last 3 years or so that I said that I think that self-diagnosis is unwise. I can understand how it can be difficult to get a correct diagnosis. However, just declaring yourself so when you could actually have something else that might actually benefit from some treatment, some therapy or some medications or something, when you just go and make this completely invented version, and then what happens is some of the people in these communities online become essentially cult leaders, preaching a whole pile of shit basically. And then one of them in particular, I had a minor disagreement with, basically kicked off for their followers to basically mob me. This had been last year. I had active suicidal ideation from that, and when his followers who lick his ass may as well be, found out, they called me an abuser and manipulative and all that shit. It is fucking abusive bullshit. It is basically bullying and mobs to do with this stinking fucking politics. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So basically this online thing, the question, the justification that would be used is, but we can't all be wrong, can we? It is a validation circle jerk, right? So they're all backpatting each other, and they have no history whatsoever. Exaggerate. Some of them actually confess that they exaggerate when they do go to get assessed, put on a show, performance to get a frickin' diagnosis, and something else fits better, like anxiety, right? But for some weird reason, autism has become the #1 self-identity, then followed by ADHD, but they like to call it themselves an ADHDer, and then the latest I've seen is calling themselves an AuDHDer, like combining them, right? It is a fucking joke. They don't even have mild quirks. It is ridiculous. Now, my son was diagnosed with Aspergers and ADHD as a child, and he had significant struggles, right? He needed a lot of support to get to where he is today as a young adult now. And I get really fucked off basically with these fakers online I'm glad that some people are actually starting to challenge this whole self-diagnosis thing in these communities. Some other people are brave enough to do it. I noticed that one, still identifying as neurodivergent, and they say that they're diagnosed autistic, diagnosed Aspergers, I think. Aspergers is actually still diagnosed in some places as DSM-4. DSM-5's been around since 2013, but some countries still use both. New Zealand actually still uses both. But anyway, carry on about Asperger's supremacists and all this shit, yet the ones who are doing this shit are claiming to be diagnosed Asperger's, and they have no fucking history whatsoever. And so what they do is to get around it, they try and build up these communities and try and say they have this and that. But if you look through their history on social media, they will actually admit that they had no problems socially previously until a burnout event, which is caused by their occupation, and they tend to be in high stress occupations with high people load, for example, lots of social contact. And then, oh, this burnout must be that I'm autistic. So this is what they're convincing each other. So anyway, some of these people, one of them actually said, this is two-faced, because this is actually one of the people criticising the whole concept of self-diagnosis is valid. They said it's been a bit two-faced because on one hand you're saying that let's self-diagnose so we can be part of this community, very social orientated and who's popular and all this shit, and some people profit out of it. And the other is that they're saying, oh, but we don't want a formal diagnosis because of stigma. I to have that privilege to be able to mask since you were a toddler for decades, full time, without anyone noticing anything, even yourself. It's a fucking pile of bollocks. So anyway, somebody said, I've got a half-assed diagnosis. It's in my medical records, but even though I haven't really been, thoroughly looked into. Actually, I've got that too. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so, got my, this is like 200 pages, right? That a psychiatrist is currently reading to figure out 30 years of mess. But anyway, let's have a look. In 2015, it says here, sorry, I didn't tag them in advance. Let's have a look. This is a release letter from 2 months in a freaking psych unit, right? And it says in the record severe anxiety and distress, but and it says here severe anxiety and distress and a background of multiple psychosocial stresses. But anyway, talked a bit about the situation. It says we believe she's suffering from bipolar affective disorder type 1, currently in remission. They basically dragged me out till I couldn't fight back. When I fight back, you know that I'm actually feeling a lot better. Okay, anyway, her past medication history includes celiac disease, hypercholesterolemia, which means that my cholesterol levels are high, probably from my frickin' meds, fibromyalgia, Aspergers, there you go, anxiety, depression. So like I say, that's a half-assed diagnosis. Then they also said in that medical records, oh, I don't see any signs of it. Oh, here it goes. Asperger's. This was a reported self-diagnosis, however, no evidence of this was seen. You could say that it wasn't really a self-diagnosis, it was a half-assed diagnosis, because a psychologist and a psychiatrist said to me that I am, but they don't diagnose adults. So the thing is that ACC decided to use against me one of the reasons for compensation is I tried to suggest autism because I brought up my son's diagnosis twice in the report, at least twice. I said, what's the relevance of this? They said, oh, because there can be traits in children and their parents. It's, evidence-based research. The reason they do that is so they can try and blame something else which isn't covered, right? Because only mental injury is covered in the New Zealand's PTSD, which I was finally diagnosed with. Formally, even though it says in this hospital stuff as well, history, not on that list, but on another list, it's in history of PTSD. So they're kind of like all over the freaking show. So anyway, let's have a look at what New Zealand psychiatrists said. Now what they do is they copy what the last one said. So it all gets passed down. So just jump ahead. So this was his first appointment with this New Zealand psychiatrist, right? He must have gotten the letter because he put down past medical history. He listed in the same order, but he split out anxiety and depression and then added allergy to penicillin and sulfur as well. He added fibromyalgia, Aspergers again. So I could argue, if I wanted to, hey, I'm diagnosed, or I've been diagnosed. And then what happened is he kept saying major depressive disorder and anxiety disorder, and he couldn't see the bipolar that the hospital had decided on. Now the hospital decided on that because of a letter from getting site reports from 2002, 2006 New Zealand, when I had been trialled on lithium twice and didn't agree with me. So they thought, they see the word lithium, then they decide bipolar disorder. It is ridiculous, it is frustrating, but anyway, so let's jump ahead. So he stops listing the historical ones, he lists the current diagnoses. He lists first major history of recent major depressive disorder currently in remission, anxiety disorder, and then he puts history diagnosed by bipolar affective disorder type 1 in Australia, 2015 one and only episode, etc. So it carries on like that, right? And then 2017, I get this urgent referral to psychology, and because the psychiatrist is in the community health and they only take moderate to severe cases. Oh, this is another thing that pisses me off. It's this neurodiversity movement likes to say that people there's no such thing as severe. What a load of fucking horse shit. Anyway, it says here urgent. Xanthe has a history of trauma and possible autism that she was diagnosed with in Australia. And it carries on, and it says the psychiatrist listed his name here. It's also unclear whether or not she is bipolar. So back and forth all over the fucking shit. So anyway, the urgency resulted in nearly a year later having psychological assessment. And the report's several pages long that she gave to me. And it says over a period of 2 months psychological assessment. I actually checked, it was actually over 4 months. And 2018, and she said this was originally requested to assess queried autism spectrum disorder. The assessment resulted in the following diagnostic profile: bipolar 1 disorder, social anxiety disorder, mild, currently being managed, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, she's a part-time psychologist, the only one in town that is in community health, and then basically there's one, as far as I know, psychiatrist as well in the community health services, and then now and again they'll get a locum as well. And you're on a waiting list for ages. It's usually a 2-year wait to see the psychologist. Anyway, the mental health nurse referred me to ACC as well, and I started counselling with our head therapy for over 3 years. And the thing is, is that psychologist who did the psychological assessment consulted with the psychiatrist and another psychologist and a mental health nurse. Now, they decided, because I am in the grey area, if it's not a clear-cut case, that it is better to go against the diagnosis. They told me, one, nothing's done about it anyway, New Zealand, because it would have been probably likely, level 1 if anything. And then two, they could have used it against me. Like ACC could have said, oh, you've always been like that. Therefore, we will decline you treatment for PTSD, which was weekly therapy with a trauma psychologist, a clinical psychologist who is qualified to deal with trauma. Now, so anyway, it comes back to ACC, and they try to blame everything else that they like. So ACC chosen psychiatrist, has a very bad reputation. Use all these freaking excuses, such as I made this blog, I wrote a book, I can't be that bad. They recognise I have a mental injury, but they try and reduce it below their threshold. Independent psychiatrist, I had to find one myself, but a lot of them are charging a fortune. Redid the assessment. I got awarded costs, but I didn't win at that stage, the review stage. I was now going to court, which is probably going to happen next month at the earliest. It's basically they try and blame because the bipolar isn't covered, the autism isn't covered, and their legislation, their rules say that they can do it on traits. So it's an utter joke. I'm very disillusioned with the psychiatry profession. However, it's not the answer to go around and just, identify it into something and rip off medical diagnoses, and they're going, what's the harm of doing this? How are we harming anyone if we're not getting anything anyway? You're harming if you're ripping off medical diagnoses and watering them down, diluting them down to make them trivial so that the people that really do need the supports end up getting seen as like part of the quirk crowd, so they don't need the supports either. Because there's only so much resources to go around. I had severe mental health issues and I was on a waiting list for ages for all this shit, right? I mean, I was able to see the psychiatrist quickly, put me on some meds, but even that was over a year to get something reasonably acceptable, and very frustrating. Anyway, 2 weeks time, I'm seeing being reassessed ASD and ADHD this time as well, but he's actually reading all of this. He's reading, first time a psychiatrist is going to read all my medical records that are relevant, and this time I actually well prepared. Last time I didn't. I've actually written a list of things that I think are relevant. The thing is, so I don't really care either way it goes, because he said to me that my case is obviously complex, and it sounds like they downplayed my traits in the report that he read. He read some key reports, and he said that they may still be significant enough to be part of the picture for me. But he wrote a letter to ACC for them, saying that my diagnosis is in doubt. So, I mean, it's kind of, the thing is that the people that self-diagnose, they have such conviction about it that it's almost like a religious conviction. The thing is, these things are not black and white. The diagnostic categories are not very precise, really. So lots of things can look similar, but people feel offended if they were given a different diagnosis, that they may be able to have improvement with their situation, with therapy or meds or something. No, they want to do this popularity contest instead, and they want to make money out of it, out of being con artists, I will call them. And anyway, I think I've pretty much covered most of the stuff in here. So 2 weeks time I'm having my assessment. Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about it because, it's like the psychiatrist I came across, because I was trying to find one to help me, because you cannot just use your own words in court. You have to use medical evidence, so that's why I had to get historical shit, which took me ages, forever to do. But it's kind of like putting my history in order. I've been dicked around for 30 years, right? And it will make no difference to me, really, in the bigger picture, other than just to now that I've been in treatment for a while, since 2015, 2017 properly, that, and I'm still left with permanent impairment. Oh, that's the other thing, is that these identitarians like to go, I'm disabled, but I have no impairment. The WHO definition of disability, from what I gather, if it's still correct, includes impairment. So it's a pile of fucking bullshit. It's like someone saying they need reading glasses, believing that they know what it's like to be blind, but then they're denying that blindness exists. That's what it's like. There are differences in severity of disabilities.